Jane was knitting in her living room. She was very happy knitting, as always, because it always relaxed her and took away a lot of stress if she was feeling stressed. Suddenly, she spotted something out of the corner of her eye. There was a woman who seemed to be exhausted, resting up against her wall outside. She looked out the window, and the woman didn't seem to see her. Jane felt very sorry for the woman and wondered, was she in a weakness? So she went outside and asked her would she like to come into her house for a cup of tea. A few minutes later, the woman sat down at Jane's table, and Jane brought her a cup of tea. The woman said, "Thanks very much. You did your good deed for the day." She drank her tea. Then Jane nearly fainted with shock when the woman took out a gun and pointed it at Jane. The woman said, "Okay, I know you have lots of money in this house and jewellery, so hand it over or I'm going to shoot you." Suddenly the woman felt kind of dizzy. The gun lowered against her will and then fell to the ground. A few minutes later the woman came around. She must have fell asleep. Jane was standing in front of her smiling. It had then hit her that her tea had been drugged. The woman was tied to a chair and gagged, while Jane smiled at her and said, "You see, I actually thought you were tired. I thought you were in a weakness, and I would have still tortured you. But now that I know you were trying to rob me, well, that brings the torture to another level." Jane took out a drill and smiled, then drilled into the woman's knees as tears were rolling down her cheeks. Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Sheriff Dave Watson was tired of the same group of teenagers wreaking havoc on Halloween night. He was proud of keeping the law and order in his town, and he wasn't going to let those pesky kids ruin his good reputation. Last Halloween he moved them on, but they just moved to another place, and he had to move them 3 times before they finally called it a night. And at that it was then about 3 or 4 in the morning. He was parked in a spot just over from the farmhouse where they were having their Halloween party. He had a good vantage point, so he got out of his car and looked through binoculars to see what they were doing. They were drinking and smoking weed, getting high as usual. He had something very special planned for them this Halloween, and that something would knock them out for the whole night, so he could get some peace and quiet for Halloween. He waited until the whole crew were in the farmhouse before he locked the door and pumped the whole house with sleeping gas. He had tried it out on various scumbags around his town, and it worked a charm. About an hour later he was pumping the house with the gas, and they didn't even notice as the gas was invisible. Within minutes they went from dancing to falling sound asleep. When the sheriff drove off smiling, the door of the farmhouse opened. Suddenly a great fog came across the shed and mixed with the gas, carrying it through the town. Within minutes, trick-or-treaters who were enjoying Halloween suddenly started to fall asleep right in the street or footpath. Dave passed one couple who were lying down on the ground, saying to himself they drank too much, not knowing it was the gas being carried by the fog. Suddenly Dave noticed it getting very foggy, so foggy he could barely see. Then suddenly he felt drowsy and fell asleep at the wheel as the police car veered off a cliff, falling hundreds of feet below and blowing up, with Dave burning inside. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Simon was upset because of not being able to celebrate Halloween with the rest of his friends. He had planned on sneaking out to go trick-or-treating with them, but he decided not to because if his dad caught him, he would be furious. Simon's dad, Jack, was the local sheriff, and he banned Simon from celebrating Halloween because last Halloween his wife Elizabeth burned in a fire in the local town hall. There was a Halloween party going on there at the time. Simon's dad was giving him his usual speech. You are not going to go trick-or-treating, you're not going to be watching scary movies, and you are not going to be reading any scary stories. Do you understand? Halloween is banned from this house. Now I am going to have to go out on patrol, and unfortunately the local idiots make this the busiest night of the year, so don't give Sammy any trouble while she's babysitting you. Simon agreed, and Jack went outside to his car to start what would be a busy night ahead. Sammy looked at Simon and said, "Geez, I thought my dad was strict." Simon said, "You have no idea how strict he is." Sammy felt sorry for Simon not being able to celebrate Halloween and go trick-or-treating with his friends. So she said, "Look, if you want you can watch a horror movie that I'm watching at 9. At least you can get into the Halloween spirit by watching a scary movie." Simon said, "No thanks," and he walked up to his room. He opened a notebook and started writing a scary story. Jack was driving along the road when he pulled on the brakes. He couldn't believe his eyes. He nearly ran over some idiot in a Halloween outfit, but he knew something was wrong. He couldn't put his finger on it right away until it suddenly clicked. When it hit him, what person would be almost 10 foot tall wearing a Halloween outfit? Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Jack backed right away and drove down the street, not sure of what he saw, but he knew that it was moving and was alive, but couldn't believe anything that size could be human. He then thought to himself, could it be some teenagers playing a trick on him, using a few of them up on a ladder inside some outfit? He changed his mind from that idea when he froze in shock seeing trick-or-treaters run screaming from what looked like giant zombies chasing them. The place was like out of some zombie movie. When it finally hit him, he drove straight home, and when he got into his house he said to Sammy, "Where is Simon? Where is he?" She said, "He is up in his room." "Why? He didn't move from his room all night." A few seconds later, Jack entered his bedroom, and sure enough, Simon was writing. Jack shouted, "Stop writing!" Sammy was standing by the door now also, wondering what was happening. Jack explained, "Simon, your mom didn't die by accident in that fire. What I mean is, it wasn't just a random accident. Your mom had some curse. I'm not sure how she got it, but her mom before her had it also. For some reason, what they write as a story happens in real life. You needed a Halloween story for school, and your mom wrote one for you. She was drunk because I admit I was giving her a hard time, but she thought she was doing a great thing writing you that story. It was even after Halloween because she would have wrote it on Halloween, but she didn't have a clue she was so drunk. Anyway, she would not have dreamt of writing in that diary when she knew it was cursed and when she knew everything would happen in real life, but she was drunk. She hadn't a clue what she was doing. But I want you to know, Simon, this wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault. But please do not ever write in that diary again. All I know is that that notebook is evil. She went there that night to save people. She saved everyone's life but her own. She burnt in that fire, telling everyone there would be a fire. She waited there until everyone was out, but only on a Halloween night in a certain notebook. What did you write? Whatever you wrote will happen in real life. It's a curse, especially on Halloween. Suddenly Jack burst into flames. Simon and Sammy screamed. None of the room caught on fire, but his dad was lying burnt to a cinder on his bedroom floor. Simon wished he never ever wrote a Halloween story. Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Tom was a very skilled hacker and could hack almost anything. He hacked various government organizations, and the thrill was huge, but he wanted to go on to the next level. He used to work his way around the dark web like he owned the place, but what really made him stand up and take notice is the internet rumor of there being a Marina's Web. The Marina's Web got its name from the Marina Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean. There was meant to be all sorts of huge secrets revealed in that deepest part of the dark web. He knew the difference between the deep and dark web. The deep web was mostly medical records and police records, etc. And the dark web was where all the bad stuff goes on, like hiring serial killers and human experiments against a person's will, etc. But in the Marina's Web, he heard the world's most top secrets are revealed, like the Vatican archives and the secret location of Atlantis. As exciting as all that sounded to him, it was a bigger and deeper agenda he had than access those secrets. He just had to know if it was real. He heard the rumour and didn't take much notice of it until one night he was eavesdropping on his dad and heard him speaking about an artificial intelligence that no one can tap into because there is a certain algorithm needed and it is impossible to find without a quantum computer. The thing is, his dad works in the government and he knows there is a quantum computer in the building. He just needs to find a way in. Through intensive research how to hack the building's security system, he found a way in. And once he was near the quantum computer, he knew he had a very limited time. He was disappointed that nothing was happening, just the usual dark web, until the screen went black, then green, and an angry-looking emoji popped up with writing, "Marina's Web. AI system accessed." He smiled with excitement and wondered what would he try to find using the AI and the algorithm, the secret location of Atlantis, the Vatican secrets. It all seemed exciting now that he knew that he was in the AI system. His face dropped when he saw what was on the screen. It said, "World War III activated. Earth will be destroyed in 10 seconds. Then the countdown began." Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Marcus was the owner of a gated community. He prided himself on keeping his neighbours safe. They paid a big price to live in the community, but they felt it was worth it. One day Marcus was in his kitchen, drinking a cup of coffee, when he heard something at his door. He assumed it was his neighbour, but was shocked when he saw that it was a person in a mask carrying a gun. He ran into the hall and down towards his safe room, but he couldn't reach it before the man shot him in his leg. He couldn't believe how anyone could breach the gate of the community, don't mind say get into his house. He was worried it was some drug addict who could shoot him to just grab anything to sell for money for their next fix. Marcus pleaded with the person, "Please don't hurt me, just take anything you want and go, please." The person began to speak. "Hello there, Mr. Marcus. Aren't you very good helping people stay safe in this gated community? But then again, you get paid big for it, don't you? Now take me to the room that you even make more money from." Marcus was wondering did he mean what he thought he meant, so he took him around to room after room, but not to the room that he thought he meant. The man pointed the gun at Marcus's head and said, "You have 5 minutes to take me to that room, or I'm going to have my friends burn this community to the ground." Within 3 minutes, Marcus opened the door, where valuable paintings lined the wall. The man looked at one painting and found it very realistic, and as he moved closer, he saw a man blink. The man was behind bars. Marcus took a gun from behind a chair and pointed it at the man and said, "So you meant the paintings? I thought you found out about the human trafficking ring I run. Having them all here in this gated community works very well for me. Then I have them put out to wherever the highest price comes from. It's a pretty good business plan." The man froze when Marcus pulled a rope, which dropped a curtain exposing loads of people in cages that were ready to be trafficked. The man said, "Let me go. I won't tell anyone, please." Marcus found it strange when he heard the man giggle. He knew people giggled out of fear, but it didn't really suit this situation. And if he is afraid and begging to be let go, why would he be giggling? Then he saw one of the men in the cages drinking blood from a bottle. He then went from being weak-looking to like a monster. He went around biting everyone in the cage, and they all turned into vampires from the brother of the man in the mask, who was now a vampire. He knew his brother needed vampire blood to escape. It was the only way. Otherwise, he would have no impulse to survive or to bite anyone, and if he did, it would be pointless. He smiled as the people that were in cages were now out of their cage and coming straight for Marcus. They didn't attack each other, which he knew would happen. He smiled knowing that soon the gated community will become a community of vampires. Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. A black cat arrived at Brian's house one day in October. They named him Stray because he just strayed in off the street. Brian initially liked the cat, but the more days went on, he found it very strange. Brian had been convinced that the black cat was his dead sister, who was killed in a fire a few days ago. His parents, no surprise, told him to stop letting his imagination run wild with him. There were different occurrences happened. First, he knew that his sister Susan hated him playing music loud, and one day when he had his radio loud, the black cat walked up and put it off. The next strange thing that happened was when he walked into her room, the black cat was sitting next to her diary, as if the cat was reading it. Brian was watching a movie on Halloween night, and they had candles around the room for decoration, with pumpkins, etc. Suddenly the cat went mad and jumped, knocking all the candles, which caused a fire in the room. Within seconds the room caught fire, and by the time the fire brigade came, the room was gutted. Nobody was injured, but Brian was wondering, was the cat Susan letting them know that she perished in the fire? His parents still didn't believe him, until something so horrifying happened that his parents went into shock while he rang the police. The black cat was standing in front of a girl, and the girl was Brian's dead sister. He thought he was seeing a ghost, until his sister spoke to him. "Brian, I am not your sister, nor I never was. Your parents kept me prisoner in this house for years without anyone knowing I was here. Did you not think it strange I was never allowed to leave my room? I know you're only 8, but come on, surely you found it strange." Brian's parents hadn't realised. He rang 911, and they jumped out of their shock when the police stormed the room. After a lot of talking with the police and investigating, it came out that my sister was in fact kept prisoner in my house since she was 3, and the girl whose body was found in my house was a girl whose mum was a witch who cast a spell on my parents to burn, but her spell didn't work until when they were being driven away in the police car, the car lost control and drove right into a wall, blowing up. I wondered why her mom didn't just call the police about her daughter until I had realised her mom had been dead for over 8 years. When she was walking her daughter one day, as a toddler going to pet a black cat, she ran across the street and a car would have hit her, only for her mom running out and pushing her out of the way, which killed her instead. Her other daughter was that girl's twin sister, Susan. Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Jerry was 8 years old when he was in class one day. As usual drawing, his favourite types of cartoons. They always were horror cartoons. They were drawings of witches and monsters, even when it wasn't Halloween. He fit right in when it was Halloween, because the other kids were interested in the spooky stuff then. But he didn't forget the times they laughed at him. He promised himself he would have the last laugh. It was Halloween night, 15 years later, and there was a school reunion. Jerry couldn't believe his luck. The school reunion falling on a Halloween night. Jerry was on his own most of the night during the party, apart from some classmates walking up to him and saying hi, probably feeling guilty for how they treated him in school. Everyone was enjoying themselves and were dressed in different Halloween costumes. He had to admit to himself he was rather pleased to be at a Halloween party because he was never asked to any party as a kid. When the party was over and they were outside of the school was when Jerry shot them, saying to himself, "You were laughing at my crayon drawings. Now I'll be laughing at your chalk outlines." The next morning, Jerry smiled, looking at the crime scene tape and chalk outlines of where he shot them dead. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Memento Mori. Stuart whispered the phrase to himself over and over as he picked both of his bags. The first was his gym bag, which he would be utilising this morning. The second was his medicine bag, which he would use later tonight. Once both bags were packed, he mixed his pre-workout blend to enhance his gym session, slung his gym bag over his shoulder, and walked out his bedroom. The brilliant sunshine hurt his eyes as he emerged from the poorly lit sanctuary he called his room. As he closed and locked his front door, the wind picked up and rustled the door. Squinting, he looked up at the sky. A bird of some sort circled his garden. He imagined it to be a bird of prey, looking for a meal to swoop down and capture. This thought made him smile. What a life such a bird must live, taking life as when it sees fit. The drive to the gym followed the same routine every day, with hardcore rock thumping from the speakers to rile him up. Once completed, more routine followed, with a shower and protein shake while getting dressed. The drive home would be the complete opposite of the previous trip, as Stuart would listen to softer soul music and take in the beautiful trees that lined the roads. Often he would even give $1 or $2 to a homeless person that would come tapping on his window for change. Humans are creatures of habit, and Stuart is no different. The only difference in the routine of the day would be the night festivities of this particular evening. Most nights he would cook dinner, eat in front of the television, and then proceed to watch more television in his bedroom. Tonight, however, was the 42nd Thursday of the year, an arbitrary fact to most, but not to Stuart. Tonight was his night to indulge, just as he let out the maniac in himself on the drive to gym. Tonight was the night he let the maniac out, loose on the world. People do not change much from youth to adulthood. Some maturity occurs, but the general character and behaviour of the individual remains. Stuart had always wanted to help the world, at least in a way that he saw fit. As a youth, this involved cleansing his neighbourhood of stray dogs and cats. He took no actual pleasure in the act, no more so than a postman would rejoice delivering mail. He simply felt it was something to be done. As he did it over the years, his method of euthanization had evolved from bludgeoning the animals to squeezing their necks until he heard the sick pop of confirmation that the neck had broken. But as all things in life evolve, so did his target for cleansing. Stuart had grown to realize that in order to cleanse the world, it was not dogs and cats that needed to be cleaned. It was the people. The people were the sickness. 41 Thursdays before the chosen night meant that he knew exactly what he was doing. He planned out his routines, as well as who his patients would be. Access to the sick was yet more proof that people cared not one bit about the sick. Throughout the course of his planning, he would walk into various hospitals. Talking to the nurses, he would gain the knowledge of whether they would still be in need of his services when the glorious night came. The ease and success of his planning was yet more proof given to him from God that this was indeed his mission in life. He worked from home as an architect, but Stuart had always wanted to be a doctor. He may not have the qualifications, but the work he did was equally as important. The only difference that Stuart saw between himself and traditional doctors were the clothes they wore. His choice of dress for the task at hand was a heavy overcoat paired with an authentic 1620s plague mask. After all, he couldn't risk getting the sicknesses. Once home from the gym, Stuart cooked and ate before taking a nap in preparation for the big night. He set an alarm for midnight, but the excitement for the evening woke him up 15 minutes before the scheduled time. He lay in his bed in the dark for a moment. He felt at peace in the dark. He looked around in the darkness at the outlines of the furniture in his room. His light breathing was the only sound around him. He flexed his toes and arched his back to stretch the sleep away. He sat up straight in the darkness. Stuart was ready to begin his night of work. Memento mori, he proclaimed to the darkness. The patrons of St. Barnabas ward, that for the mentally ill, were long asleep by the time the wind blew Stuart through the doors. He had his medicine bag in hand and the plague mask on as he sat beside his first patient. He never rushed the process. Each patient was as important and deserving as the next. Stuart picked up the patient chart and read the name out loud. James, I absolve you of your sins. May God have mercy on your soul. Memento mori. And with that, Stuart inserted the needle deep into the arm of sleeping James. The pancuronium bromide slowly left the syringe and set to work causing powerless and respiratory arrest. This method of cleansing was the best Stuart had found prior to this. He had held a pillow over the face of his patients. He moves from patient to patient with the obvious speed of a very experienced executioner. As he injects the saving liquid into his last patient, her eyes suddenly shoot open and stare into the hollow eye sockets of the mask. Memento mori, Stuart tells her as she looks at him in confusion. All she manages out is Birdman, before her muscles lock up and her breathing stops. He strokes her hair gently and admires his work. She is silent, and he knows he has done a good job. God's work. Packing his utensils back into his bag, he heads back home. He has work tomorrow. Life goes on. Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. I asked my love to take a walk, just a little walk, down beside where the waters flow, down by the banks of the Ohio. He sang it so softly, the melody barely seemed to leave his lips. His voice was beautiful, hauntingly so. He held her hand as they lay next to the stream, and he sang for her, and only say that you'll be mine, in no other's arms intertwine. So soft his voice was, almost as though he was whispering. Well, he needn't worry that anyone else would hear him sing. The song was, after all, for her, so he didn't need to belt out the tune. He turned and looked at her. He was overcome with a rush of warmth people call love. With his free hand he gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. She had a faint smile on her face. It was almost a neutral look, and he continued to sing, down beside where the waters flow, down by the banks of the Ohio. He got up, leaving her to lie, and listened to the melodic rush of the stream, the bright hot sun gleaming down on God's good earth, the green grass beneath their picnic blanket rustling gently in the breeze. It was scenic, a simple, delicate daisy, just one. He had no need for a bunch. He walked with it gently. He had always been a gentle person. It reflected in his singing, with the way it was so quiet. If you asked anyone about him, they'd tell you he'd never hurt a fly. They say love is like a flower, you must nurture it and let it grow. She was his flower, his love, his delicate little daisy. They also say you should not pick the flower and put it in a vase for display, as it will soon wither and die. Rather let the flower be, and let it be beautiful in the wilderness. That is what he intended for her. He would never pluck her and let the world see her beauty. She was his flower, and he wanted to grow and nurture her. He arrived back at the stream. A bird far off in the distance let out a shriek. Something must have frightened it. He hadn't wandered far from the stream, and once back next to her, he lay down, daisy in hand, head on the grass, breathing in her scent deeply as he lay next to her. Just as the flower in his hand had a beautiful smell, so did she. He placed the flower in her hair, further beautifying her, a flower for his flower. He looked towards the bright sun and squinted. Such a lovely day. The stream continued to flow steadily. He gazed at her with nothing but love. Unfortunately, the love he had for her was unrequited. Well, it didn't matter. He loved her enough for the both of them. He threw the knife into the river as he got up and walked away, leaving her there in all her beauty, flower in hair, young and beautiful, pale skin due to loss of blood flow, but still beautiful. He sang the last bit of the song as he walked away. I held a knife against her breast, as into my arms she pressed. She cried, "Good God, don't you murder me. I'm not prepared for eternity." I wandered home 'tween 12 and 1. I cried, "My God, what have I done? I've killed the only girl I love, for she would not want to be my bride, and only say that you'll be mine, and in no other's arms intertwine. Down beside where the waters flow, down by the banks of the Ohio. If he couldn't have her in life, he'll have her in debt." It was a secluded piece of the river. He could come visit her any time he'd like. He'd never have to fear losing her to anyone. She was his forever. Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Alice was very tired of being bullied in school. She knew the teachers knew she was being bullied, but they didn't care. She told her dad, but he just said ignore them. She knew she couldn't ignore them. How could she? She used to cry herself to sleep every night, praying and wishing and hoping they would just leave her alone. One day she went for a walk in the woods to try to forget about everything that was happening. She got a fright when she happened to walk right into her bullies. They started mocking her, and one of the girls hit Alice, and she fell down and hit a rock. She had hit her elbow and there was blood on the rock. That weekend, Alice's dad bought her a pet rabbit to cheer her up. Alice was delighted to have a pet rabbit and called it White Rabbit. The next day she had realized the rabbit escaped. She ran out of the house and saw the rabbit outside her door, as if waiting for her. She said, "White Rabbit, don't run away like that, giving me a fright." The rabbit started running into the woods, and Alice found it hard to keep up. She had realized the rabbit stopped by the rock where her blood was on. Alice found it spooky. Why would the rabbit run to that rock? She picked up her rabbit and brought him home. That Monday it was like magic. Her bullies weren't bullying her, and they spoke to her like she was always their friend. After school, Alice invited them to see a cool tree in the woods that they could climb. When they got into the woods and reached the tree, before they could step another step closer, they all screamed as they fell down a hole. It was a giant rabbit hole. Alice looked down, smiling, and said, "What's down there gave me the power to ye stop bullying me. But what is down there also has the power to make sure you will never bully me or anyone else ever again." Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Tony was lying on the operating table after being in a near-fatal accident. The doctors were performing an emergency operation on him, and they knew that he was dying, but they kept trying to save him. God knows enough people died in this hospital lately, a doctor said. Tony could hear them speaking. Suddenly he heard one of the nurses say, "We have lost all vital signs." He then found himself falling in through a tunnel, and he remembered hearing about a dark tunnel and a light people see just before they die. He then was looking down at the operation table from floating above. He wondered, was this an out-of-body experience? Was he dead? He must be, if there were no vital signs. Then suddenly he heard a nurse speaking to him. "Don't give up. It's not your time to go. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. Don't give up whatever you do. Keep fighting." The nurse had a strong Irish accent. She continued to speak. "Tony, you have so much more to do in this world. Don't give up. Come back. Don't leave. Your time to go is not now." Suddenly, Tony wasn't floating over the bed anymore, but he was back in his body and could hear a doctor say, "Wow, that was something else. He was almost gone for 10 whole minutes." A nurse said, "Vital signs are stable." Tony smiled, and a few minutes later, he was speaking to the nurse. but he realised it wasn't the nurse that saved him by asking him to not give up. The nurse said, "You gave us all a fright, Tony, but what just happened was nothing short of a miracle. You were dead for 10 whole minutes." Tony said, "Could I please thank the nurse with the Irish accent, please? She kept telling me don't give up, and that is what made me pull back from crossing over." The doctor said, "Tony, there is no one here with an Irish accent." "Well, luckily we don't have the nurse with that accent around her anymore." Tony asked, "Why? What's wrong with her?" The nurse said, "The only nurse around here with an accent from Ireland was this crazy woman. She murdered 14 of our patients, and when she was found out, she shot herself in the head. Just before she did shoot herself, she started rambling on about she would make sure we all pay for getting her caught." Suddenly the woman froze, and the doctors, when the nurse with the accent from Ireland appeared and said, "I made my penance after I killed those patients, and I proved it by bringing this patient back to life. But as for the doctors and nurses, who were the reason I was caught experimenting with murder, well, that's a different story. Within 2 minutes, everyone in the room were killed besides Tony. Soon after, the police were called, and Tony was arrested for multiple homicide of the nurses and doctors that were killed by the ghost of the nurse who saved him." Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Jim was invited to a meeting with a huge TV station boss, and he was very nervous, but at the same time very excited. When he arrived at the office, he couldn't believe what he was about to hear. The boss spoke. "We can supply you with the answers to win and become the champion in the next episode of the Super Quiz Show. Now please don't tell your friend about what I said, because if you do, trust me, it won't work out good for you. I practically own the networks that have all the big shows on. So if you want to go with this plan, great, but if not, then just forget about it and don't tell anyone." Jim was speechless for a few seconds, but to him it felt like minutes. Then he finally spoke. "You mean you want to give me the answers and win the show and become the champion and beat my friend and break his unbeatable streak?" Brian said, "Yes, and don't forget, for each episode you will win $100,000. So, we will be giving you that for a good few months. In no time you'll be a millionaire." Jim was stuck in a rut, being out of a job and could really do with the money, and didn't want to pass up on the opportunity, so he took the deal. When he told his friend Daniel that he was going to be his opponent on the next show, he pretended he was picked out of the lottery they had every week for different opponents. When Daniel heard about it, he laughed, but didn't think much of it, because to him it would be just another great win. Jim was thinking about it at home while he was watching TV, and he wondered how it would make a difference to him being given the answers, as he could not see his friend Daniel not be able to answer any question, even if it went on for hours. He rang the number of the TV boss and asked him, and was told that they knew questions he didn't know the answers to. Jim didn't bother ask how they knew he wouldn't know, but he found it strange. On the night of the quiz show, they were asked loads of questions. It seemed like hundreds. Finally it came to the last question, and the host, Mr. Major, asked Jim, "Okay Jim, you're on your last question. If you get this right, then you are the winner of this series, which will knock the current Super Quiz champion off, and you will become the champion. The question is a riddle. What ship has 2 mates and no captain, and you broke it? Jim found it strange, because he was never given the answer to this question. It was the first time he ever heard it. He could feel the sweat pouring from him and the heat of the lights shining down on him. Suddenly he felt he was going to faint when he looked over and saw his friend Daniel hold a gun to him and say, "I'll give you the answer. Friendship. You broke our friendship by taking that deal." Suddenly Jim heard the voice of the host. "Hello, Jim. Excuse me, are you okay? We are waiting for your final answer, which would entitle you to be the champion. Let me repeat the question. What is used to measure something, but also a king?" Jim answered, "A ruler." The crowd started clapping and applauding. Then everyone started screaming. He wondered why, and this time he knew he was awake. He saw Daniel hold a gun to him, screaming, "You're no friend of mine," and he shot him dead. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. I'm safe here. They definitely wouldn't think to look for me here. I can't tell you where here is, because they might get to you, and thereby get to me. But you're part of me, so basically know where here is. You're in my head, so if you delve deep enough and focus intently, you can see where I am. But there's no need for such. I'm safe, and so you are too. They're dangerous, and our safety is my top concern. I can't let them get to us. I've seen what they're capable of, and it's not fun looking. The blood streamed down the sidewalk. The exit site of the bullet looked like a small creature had crawled out of his head. It was a gaping hole. His brown hair matted to what was left of his skull by the scarlet mess. His scrawny arms lay motionless at his side, covered in dirt accumulated on the walkway, blood seeping into his t-shirt. A stain like that definitely won't come out. A small crowd had gathered and looked on, in a mixture of awe and disgust. It was such a grotesque horror, committed on such a beautiful day. Rather warm for autumn, but nonetheless still an overall great day. Besides, for the man with his brain painting the sidewalk, it definitely wasn't a great day for him. The crowd spoke in low murmurs, no one able to make sense of the atrocious act committed in the city centre in broad daylight. Cars continued to drive by, each stopping briefly to try and catch a glimpse of the drama evidently unfolding on the sidewalk. The buildings enclosing the street on both sides seemed to blend into the background. There was no one to focus on but him. He must have known too much about them. This is what happens when you know too much. This is why you need to protect us. He was probably a father, computer technician, or something equally boring. And now look at him. The ambulance sirens caused everyone to divert their attention. Strange no police had shown up. I'm sure many a concerned civilian had called it in. Now only an ambulance. Curiosity killed the cat. This was my first encounter with their stronghold on the public. Crazy, huh? A fire in the building I lived in was another danger alert. The fire killed one of the guys I knew who stayed on the 3rd floor. He was a pretty cool guy. We'd played a few pickup games of basketball together at the community centre courts a few times. He too must have known too much about them. Incredible the lengths they'd go to get rid of him, starting a fire in an apartment building where hundreds of people live. Strangely enough, he was the only death in the fire. The fire department issued a statement that the lit cigarette he fell asleep with was the cause of the fire. I was among the crowd outside the building, being tended to by paramedics, when they wheeled his charred corpse out the smoking remnants of our communal home. His once white skin was now a very reddish pink in most parts. The rest of him was crispy black. Blood seeped out through the cracks in the now hardened skin and gave colour to the white sheet that did a poor job of concealing the abomination he had become. I may not be a smart man, but I know better to believe the nonsense story the fire department gave about the cause of the fire. It wasn't the cigarette, it was them. The crispy man had known too much, and they dealt with him. The embers of the fire glowed dimly in the darkness of the night. It was almost beautiful. The flashing lights of the fire truck and shouts and cries of the now homeless people faded into the background. They had struck again. My third and final encounter with their destructive power was by far the worst. It was the boot up my ass I needed to get us out to safety. It was all the confirmation I needed to know they posed a real threat to us. I didn't know the guy, but whoever he was, he didn't deserve to die the way he did. I was taking a walk through the park to clear my mind of all the negativity and stress I'd been inflicted with, when my thoughts were dragged instantly back to the park. I had stumbled and nearly tripped into almost dark park. I looked down annoyed to see what had caused my stumble. There in my path was the abdomen of a man. His abdomen was dressed impeccably, so it was fair to assume his grand night had come to an abrupt end. I was at a loss for words. I didn't know what to do. My first thought was to locate the rest of his body. Leaving the abdomen donned in a tuxedo jacket, I walked slowly down the path, scanning left and right for parts of the man. Boy, did I find them. He had been completely ripped apart. Strewn on both sides of the path were his hands, the rest of his arms, his feet in what looked like expensive dress shoes, and the legs. The head, however, was nowhere to be found. Unperturbed, I continued my search. The path led me to the gate of a park, where my search proved fruitful. Mounted on the spikes above the gate was the stranger's head. They had no respect for the dead. How could they violate a man like this? All because he knew too much. Leaving the head on the gate, I left in a hurry. No point summoning the police. They would not get involved with these people. Now, do you see why I must do all I can to ensure our safety? These people know no bounds. They have no regard for the law or human life. All this debt because of the knowledge people had acquired. Knowledge is power, but in this case, it also grounds for debt. Unfortunately for us, I am knowledgeable. As I'm sure you can guess, we're next on the hit list. I won't tell you exactly what it is I know, so if they get to me first, they might spare you for your ignorance. You must be wondering why I fear for you, because as I said, you're part of me. You know what I know. But upon my death the bond might break, therefore you won't know it anymore, thus being spared. That however is worst case scenario, I would rather just keep us both alive. Do you hear that? The buzzing? I think they found me. We've been compromised. Sorry, old pal. This is the end of the road. The door is opening now. Oh God, how are they getting in? The door has no handles, so how? Oh God! The door opened, and the nurses walked into the padded room. He sat on the floor rocking back and forth, shouting, straitjacket sitting tightly around him. Every time he was scheduled to get his medicine he did this, screaming and shouting about them and knowledge. Once sedated, the nurses put the clozapine in his mouth and gave him enough water to wash them down. They then checked to make sure he swallowed the medication. Anthony had been admitted into the psychiatric ward of St. Bernard's Hospital over 3 years ago. He was found wandering the streets covered in blood by police after an extensive manhunt was launched following the deaths of 3 unrelated individuals. Brutal deaths, all found to be carried out by Anthony. He was sent to trial and proven extremely mentally unstable, earning him a lifetime stay in the padded room. The mind is a terrible thing to waste. Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Death. That was the odour that occupied the room. The pungent smell of vomit and sweat was evident, but the stench of rotting, dead flesh was predominant. David looked fearfully at his mother, lying helpless on the bed. He knew she was sick, but the sight of her disease-eaten flesh made him feel an array of emotions. With fear being the front runner, he was scared for his mother. He did not want her to die, but the fear was also for his own well-being. The imminent fear that it could be contagious made him keep his distance. His father sat holding his mother's hand. The bits of the hand that remained, that is. The disease had stripped his caregiver of most of the muscle and flesh she had once used to nurture and care for him. All the money and power his father had was of no use against a disease such as this. World-renowned doctors and specialists had been called as soon as his mother had exhibited signs of the sickness, all to no avail. Disease does not discriminate. Janice was suffering just as the poor do, dying with no means of recovery. Necrotizing facets was the name for what ailed his mother. He had heard it on the news a while before he saw it plague his mother, the flesh-eating disease. Or if the stories he had heard around school before it closed were anything to go on, the zombie disease was a more applicable diagnosis. The fever and nausea were the first symptoms. Janice was unable to take her son to school, lying weak in her bed with her temperature climbing steadily. David's father, Jonathan, put it down to a bug of sorts, and simply picked up the slack by doing the duties around the house his wife was unable to do. By the second week of sickness, Janice was completely unable to move, with her fingers and toes taking on a darkish hue. David had continued to go to school and had heard of many of the kids talk about other people suffering from a similar sounding sickness. But in all the stories he had heard, none of them ended well. Fearing for his mother's health, David repeated these stories to his father, only to be met with reassurance and comfort. That reassurance and comfort proved to be meaningless as he now sat looking at the disease-riddled body of his mother, flesh eaten beyond comprehension, holes gaping in places unimaginable. Jonathan had tried his best by all means. As soon as he saw his wife's condition deteriorate, a number of doctors were called for consultation. They all came to the same prognosis. According to the doctors looking after her, she was one of the first to be stricken by the disease, and just as the others had, her condition had progressed. Their only suggestion was to move her to the hospital wing they had designated to those afflicted with the disease. Before moving her, Jonathan thought to take David to see the hospital where they would care for his mother. They discussed the matter with her and decided to make the trip the next day. "You've been avoiding me, baby," Janice said once alone with David. "I'm just scared, Mum. I don't want you to die," came David's reply. Laughing, Janice told David, "That's not something you need to worry about, my son. What you do need to worry about is how comfy my room there is going to be," joining in with his mother's laughter. David finally dropped his inhibitions and sat close to his mother. Resting his head on her bed, she stroked his head as he fell asleep. He had not slept long at the bedside of his mother, but his dreams were those of zombies and those that hunted. Necrotizing Facetus. His father woke him to go to bed, and the disturbance of the dreams was a thorough welcome by David. Walking half asleep towards the door, he could but help glance back at his mother. He could feel the tears well up as the woman lying in the bed closely resembled those creatures that haunted his dream. The drive to the hospital the next day was excruciating. The silence seemed to drill deep into David's core as he sat next to his father. He could feel the sadness and pain emanating from the man he had always viewed as an absolute pillar of strength and wisdom. When the journey had finally ended and they sat in the car park of the hospital, David suddenly burst into tears. The stark reality of the possibility of losing his mother had hit him like a freightliner moving at remarkable speeds. His father hesitated for a second, unsure of what the appropriate response would be, given that he too felt so unable to do anything he wanted to cry to. He held his son. The two embraced tightly and said nothing. No words could have helped either feel better. The dark clouds drifting in the sky outside them closely resembled the way both of them felt inside, cold and lost. The bright lights in the hospital corridor beat down on them. They winced as they walked in, waiting for their eyes to adjust. "Good morning. We're here to view and book a room in the CDC wing, please," Jonathan asked. We're sorry to inform you. There has been an incident in the CDC room, sir. We're not accepting any new patients at the moment." "What? That's preposterous. What kind of incident?" Jonathan shouted at the nurse. Before she could answer, the doors to the CDC wing burst open, and what looked like the remains of a man ran through the doors, leaving footprints of blood behind him. He lunged at a woman seated on the chairs outside the Center for Disease Control, and people were too shocked to respond. Pinning her down, Jonathan and David could see the sick man biting and clawing at the woman's face. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. He had more holes in him than flesh. Bits of bone could be seen through the loose hanging hospital gown that covered the eaten man. The disease had all but devoured his body, and it was a miracle he was able to move. "Does that answer your question, sir?" the nurse screeched as she made a beeline for the exit. Dragging David, Jonathan followed the panicked crowds through the door and towards the car park. The only people left in the hospital were the zombie-looking individual and his victim. Well, what was left of her after he had eaten his fill and pulled all her intestines out through the hole he had chewed in her stomach. Rushing to get in the car, David and Jonathan said nothing as they ran and pushed their way through the crowds to get where they were going. Locking themselves in their car, they merely sat where they were, not moving and not saying anything, bursting into tears once again. David was the only one to finally break the silence. "We have to get home to Mom, Dad." As they pulled into the driveway, Jonathan had already begun giving David instructions. "As soon as we get in, you need to go up to your room and pack a bag. We're going to go straight to the airport and get on a plane to India. Your Uncle Kieran mentioned something about doctors working on stuff like this there. We'll take your mother, and this will be all sorted out. Come straight to the room when you're packed." Almost as soon as the car was stationary, David leapt out of the car and ran up the driveway and into his house. Jonathan was close behind. As Jonathan made his way into his bedroom, he could hear his son cursing and banging his cupboard doors. He too would pack a bag for him and his wife, and they would leave to a safer place. Having finished packing some clothes into a bag, David closed it and ran out of his room. The tears had begun to dry, and a smile crept over his face at the thought of 3 of them flying to India to make Mum better. Who knows, maybe Uncle Kieran would be waiting at the airport for them. Bursting through the door of his parents' room, the smile that had recently formed once again dissolved to tears. There would be no trip to the airport, let alone India. Straddling her husband on their bed, David could see his mother. Her head was buried in her husband's chest as she feasted. Jonathan's hand dangled off the bed, drenched in his own blood. The only thing David could hear over his loud breaths was the grotesque sound of his mother chewing and slurping the bits of flesh and blood she was stuffing her face with. Standing there frozen, David saw his mother turn to face him. What now looked him in the eye was not his mother. Blood dripping from its chin, dead eyes staring, it stood up, leaving Jonathan lying on the bed with holes chewed in his body. David felt his legs give out. "Mom?" he said weakly, tears streaming down his cheeks, hoping something inside of the creature would hear and recognize her son, and perhaps grant him mercy. The ground seemed to shake as it took a step towards him. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Terry was annoyed and angry at his friend James. He had told him about an idea of a movie similar to the shark movie Jaws, and he completely stole his idea and started shooting a movie exactly, word for word almost, to his idea. Which made it worse, James didn't even ask him to be involved. Terry knew he had to get his own back on him, but didn't know what he would do. But he knew he would think of something. Eventually he did. It was the second day of the shooting, and they were finally on their first shark attack scene. That is what gave him the idea. He was hidden behind a tree watching them through binoculars. They had a fake shark which looked totally real. There were a couple on the beach talking, then they went for a swim and they were both attacked by the shark. He had to admit, the whole thing looked very real. The next day of shooting, he was behind the same tree watching. He had his binoculars again. The shark was in the water just like yesterday. They swam up to the shark, and within seconds there was blood all over the water. The film crew and extras clapped. They were so happy with how real it looked. Suddenly it dawned on them, the reason the scene looked real was because the shark was real. Terry smiled proud of himself for finding a way to locate a real shark and have it exactly where their fake shark should be and ready to attack. He guessed the movie might not go ahead after such a dreadful accident. Then he smiled. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Jake was looking forward to fly across the Sahara Desert because he knew he had to in order to go to where he was going in Africa. Everything was going smoothly and the flight was even practically turbulence-free. He sat back and read a book, enjoying the flight. When the plane reached the Sahara Desert, he admired the view out of the window, which was beautiful. It was a dream come true for him, as he always was interested in deserts growing up. He wondered what would it be like actually down there walking around. Suddenly the plane made a certain jerk. Everyone got a start, but when the plane started flying as normal again, they relaxed again and enjoyed the flight until a few minutes later there was a huge explosion and the plane made a dive into the desert. Within what seemed like minutes but must have been only seconds, the plane crashed into the desert. There was another big explosion and sounds of the passengers screaming. The heat of the desert was exhausting and terrifying, and within a few days the water and food in the plane was gone. Jake and the rest of the passengers were losing hope of any help coming. People were dying from heat exhaustion and hunger now. He knew that you could go longer without food than water. Well, he thought so anyway. He was feeling confused, as so were the rest of the passengers. Everyone survived the crash, but now ironically they were all afraid they were going to lose their lives from hunger and heat exhaustion. I have an idea how we can get food. Everyone looked at him, wondering what he was going to say, anxious as to know what glimpse of hope he could possibly provide by saying he had an idea how to get food. Then he spoke again. There is a coffin on the plane. It is being brought over for a funeral. Everyone sighed in disgust. But within 30 minutes, the passengers gathered around the coffin, ready to start eating the corpse. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Megan was looking through her laptop for some place to live in New York. She knew that it would be very expensive, but but she had to move for her new job. She was surprised, shocked and delighted when she saw that there seemed to be an apartment for rent very near where she was going to work. There were no photos of it, but she had to take a look, so that's exactly what she did. When she arrived at the apartment, there was a man opened the door and said to her, "Hello, you must be Megan. My name is Andrew. Well, welcome to the apartment. You can have this for $4,500 a month." She couldn't believe what he just said, so she asked him did he mean $4,500, and he said yes. When she looked inside the apartment, she couldn't believe the size of it for being in central New York and so reasonable. Megan was a pickpocket by choice. She didn't need the money, but she loved the thrill of it. She knew there were people who were kleptomaniacs, but she didn't consider herself one. She preferred to look at it as a cheap thrill. She was down the road from her apartment in a really nice clothes shop and stole a beautiful dress for $1,300. She was buzzing walking down the street, but by the time she got back to her apartment, the buzz was gone. After a few weeks, Megan got to know Andrew. She went to his apartment, which was just across from hers, and they were drinking wine. She noticed that she saw all his apartment, every room bar one, and when she asked about it, Andrew told her that it was his mom who was sick and he was looking after her, and he preferred her not to be disturbed. One night, Megan walked into Andrew's apartment and the TV was on. He was asleep on the sofa, and there was this weird horror on the TV with a girl hanging from a ceiling. She coughed a little to wake Andrew. Andrew woke up with a start and put the TV off and said, "Sorry, I was just watching some horror." Megan moved closer and went to kiss him and sneaked the keys from his pocket. She was really determined to see what was in that room. She said to Andrew, "Hey, I'm exhausted, could I just chill out here? But if you could grab a really nice bottle of wine I have in my fridge, I would really appreciate it so much." When Andrew left for her apartment, she quickly tried all the keys until she got the right one and opened the door. She didn't want to wake his mom, but she had to have a look as it all seemed very strange. She froze in horror when what she saw was a woman hanging from a wall. It looked familiar when it finally hit her that it wasn't a horror movie on Andrew's TV. He was watching a live feed of what was happening in this room, and he had a girl tied up, hanging from the ceiling with blades on the floor underneath. She heard a noise and turned around to see Andrew holding a knife, and he said, "Don't you know it's very bad to snoop around behind people's backs?" Then Andrew stabbed Megan until she bled to death. Thanks for watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. We stopped checking for monsters under our bed once we realized they were inside us. "Don't turn the lights off, please, Mommy," he said timidly, fear resonating in his voice. His mother laughed lovingly and assured him the nightlight would provide sufficient lighting from whatever he feared would come forth from the darkness once she had left. "Okay, but please check in my closet before you go," he asked of his mother meekly. She decided to humour him and did as he asked. Once satisfied nothing was in there, he seemed a little more at ease, his young head against the soft pillow. She passed by his bed and kissed his forehead lovingly. "Good night, my sweet boy," she whispered as she stood upright. "I love you, Mommy," he chimed in as she left. Just before she shut the door, "I love you too, Aaron," she said with a smile on her face as the door sealed him in from the rest of the house. Once she had left, the room immediately became tenfold scarier. The pale nightlight, rather than being reassuring, cast an eerie glow across the room, prompting shadows to dance in the darkness to some unheard tune. Aaron lay in bed, gripping the covers tightly at his chin. His mother had left the closet door ajar. If he but even closed his eyes with it unclosed, he would be vulnerable to whatever he was sure resided in there. Once the lights were off, he had to close it if he hoped to get any sleep. He looked around the room for some sort of defense against the creatures that might attack him once he tried to disrupt their plan of escaping. His eyes happened upon the baseball bat propped up against the wall near the door. He scrambled out of bed, disrupting the dance of the shadows as his colossal shadow flickered across the room as he passed through the pale glow of the light on his way to his weapon. Holding the bat in trembling hands, he scanned the room for any possible assailants. Aaron had broke out into a cold sweat. He could feel the shirt of his pajamas sticking tightly to his torso as his brow accumulated sweat. He wondered if the monsters could smell fear. If they could, he was in for it. He probably reeked of fear. And sweat, of course. He held the bat tight and took a step forward. He was going to shut the closet door. Each step felt as though he was wearing lead boots. It was almost painful walking towards what very might be your death. Dead man walking, as they would say. The shadows had begun to dance again. Perhaps it was a dance of death. Aaron began to wonder what the monster would do to him if the bat could not protect him. He could almost see it slowly stretching out to its full size, towering above him, picking him up and bringing him closer to it. Its horribly scarred face, full of blisters and warts, pouring out a gooey slime. The dead look in its eyes and row upon row of razor-sharp teeth. Would it bite his head clean off, or simply devour him whole? Aaron came back to reality, as he was now at the closet door. He turned back to check the room, once more to see if perhaps one of them had found a way around him. There was nothing. Thankfully he could see his room almost perfectly. His creased sheet lay half on the floor, half on the bed, probably from when he had scrambled out of it. The various toys scattered around the room seemed to have gathered to bear witness to the grand event that was about to unfold. The curtains rustled lightly. He had probably just forgotten to close the window properly. Aaron took a deep breath and decided he would face the monster rather than simply shutting the closet door. He exhaled quickly and swung the closet door wide open, bat high above his head and ready to face his doom. He breathed yet another deep breath, but the exhalation was more of a sigh of relief than anything. There was no monster. He felt emboldened by the fact he would have taken any monster head on. He was a warrior. At least in his eyes he was. He could take on anything. At the back of his mind he was almost disappointed now. His adrenaline was rushing. He could feel the blood in his cheeks and hear it in his ears. He was ready to fight a monster. He made his way back to his bed, but with his newfound bravery decided to close the window first. Usually Aaron would be too scared to open the curtain in the dark out of fear of what would be behind the curtain, or worse yet, what might be looking in on him from the outside. But he was brave now. He was a would-be monster killer. He could close a window and bear looking out the dark window. He approached the curtain and flung the curtain back, bat prepped to swing at any monsters hiding behind it. Nothing. Dang, monsters are scared now, he thought, with a smile on his face. They know I'm not scared, and I've got a bat, he told himself. Reaching for the window, he saw it was closed. Realizing his eyes must have played a trick on him in the dark, with nothing but the pale light to provide for his sight, he returned to his bed and threw the bat at the foot of his bed before jumping on it. The adrenaline had washed over him, and he now felt ready for bed, confident in the fact that there were no monsters, as well as the fact he had conquered his fear by means of facing that which could have possibly been lurking in the closet. He reached over the edge of his bed to pull up the cover that had been a casualty of his fear, excitement, and had fallen to the ground. Groping for the covers, his heart skipped a beat as he felt not only the cover, but something much softer beneath the covers. He had probably dropped the covers on one of his many stuffed animals. He slung himself over the bed to retrieve not only the cover, but the stuffed animal too, as some company in bed would be very welcome after his ordeal and excitement. The smell washed over him, first as his head neared the edge of the bed. The smell has no description, but if one had to put a name to it, it smelled of death. It penetrated his nostrils as it grew worse. He raised the covers, beneath which was not a stuffed animal, the decomposed face. It tried to smile, but the skin around its face was non-existent, and so the smile was just it bearing a few rotten teeth still in its head. "Why don't you come play down here with me, where it's nice and dark?" it said, as it reached a bony and fleshless hand up and pulled Aaron by their throat into the darkness. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Stephanie had schizophrenia and could see things that weren't really there. It could happen her anywhere. She really believed the things she saw were real, which was when she first saw and heard a baby cry next door. She wondered, was she just imagining things? But what really made her paranoid was last week she saw her next door neighbour, Sarah, look around when she came out of her car to see was anyone looking, and she was holding a baby. She knew what she saw, but even though she saw that, she first thought maybe she had imagined the whole thing until she heard the baby cry a few more nights. She told her parents, but they didn't want to know. Her dad just told her that she was imagining it all, and if she went to the police about her next door neighbour kidnapping a baby, then she would be put away. They would say that her hallucinations are causing other people harm and could cause herself harm. Stephanie didn't know what to do, but she knew what she saw and knew it wasn't just one of her imaginations. She said to her mom, "Mom, we need to call the police and get them to go to that woman's house, because she definitely is hiding a baby in there. You know she told us many times she is living alone, and why would she say that if she had a baby? Plus, if she is babysitting a baby, and if it's all legit, then the police will know, and she won't get into trouble, but we can't just keep quiet and do nothing. Stephanie's mom, Greta, said, "Sweetie, you have seen so many different monsters and demons and whatever else that aren't there. This is just another one of those." Stephanie said, "Please, Mom, just go over and ask the lady is there a baby with her, and who does it belong to?" Her mom sighed and told her to get some sleep. The next day, Stephanie came into her kitchen for her breakfast and said to her dad, "Where's Mom?" Her dad said, "I tried to stop her. She's actually gone over to our neighbor's house confronting her about your wild accusations that obviously are not true." Stephanie ran out the door before he could say anything else. She ran over to her neighbor's house and broke a window, then climbed in. When she was in the room, her mom was standing next to her neighbor, who was pointing a gun at her, and she turned to look at Stephanie and said, Well, look who has joined the party. Your mom here asked me whose baby I had in my house. Well, it's your damn father's baby. He decided to knock me up and didn't tell me keep the baby quiet because people will only start talking. Now I can't have anything come between me and your dad. You see, he loves me way more than you and your mom." Suddenly, Stephanie's mom ran and tried to grab the gun out of the woman's hand, and then the gun went off. They both looked at the door to see it was her dad who was just entering the room. He fell down on the ground as the bullet hit him. He looked up at his wife and said, before dying, "What? Why?" Stephanie's mom still had the gun in her hand and shot the woman who was running at her with a knife. Stephanie said, "Mom, tell the police it was me. I have schizophrenia. They will let me off." Stephanie's mom said, "No, I did this. I will tell the truth." A few minutes later, the police arrived, and a police officer said, "Police, is there anyone else in the house?" Stephanie said, "That woman tried to kill us, and she shot my dad." The police officer looked at Stephanie's mom and said, "I'm afraid you have to come to the police station with me." Stephanie said, "Not her, the other woman." The police officer said, "What other woman?" Stephanie's mom was smiling, in a daze, talking to herself. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Sam was relaxing watching TV when he got a phone call from his girlfriend Ginny. She said in an excited voice, "Hi Sam, it's me. I just finished an absolutely amazing game. Well, I'm not sure could you even call it a game. It's more of a surprise or an amazing prize or something like that. I have the choice to nominate someone close to me to experience the same thing. Trust me, you'll love it. They gave me the rules. All you need to do is go down to the bus stop across the street, and under the seat, under a stone, will be an envelope with instructions till you go to a place called the Red Room. But I know it's kinda weird at the start. You get taken in a cab and are blindfolded, so you don't know where you are going exactly. I have to admit, I was totally freaked out at that stage, but when I got to the Red Room..." Sam interrupted Jenny. "Jenny, are you high or something? What is going on? What is the Red Room?" "Okay, in the envelope you will see a questionnaire. You just fill it out and then follow the instructions to get brought to this room, which is called the Red Room. It's kind of strange though, because the room is all white. There is no red in it. but I was asked about what was my favourite food, movies, books, etc., and the room was full of everything I love, and there were loads of shopping trolleys outside the room to me carry it. Trust me, you will absolutely love it. I'll show you what I have when I get home. Sam said, "You're telling me that I can go there right now to the bus stop and fill the questionnaire?" Ginny said, "Yes, right now, because you don't know what time you're going to be collected." Sam said, "Okay babe, I'm on it right now. I'll see you after this freaking weird surprise you're talking about." A few minutes later, Sam walked to the bus stop, and sure enough there was a stone with an envelope underneath. He knew he couldn't fill out the questionnaire at the bus stop, as he needed something to lean on, and he had no pen, so he brought it back to his house and filled it out. He was asked to go to a quiet road near his house and get picked up outside a gate in an hour. He was there waiting, and a car pulled up, and a person with a face covered said, "Welcome to the Red Room, where your dreams become a reality. You don't have to pay 1 cent for loads of things you could only dream to afford to buy. There will be lots of more surprises waiting for you in the Red Room." Sam was shown into the car and blindfolded, and a half hour later his blindfold was taken off in a white room. The white room was full of everything he loved: games consoles, expensive TVs, and lots more. He then heard a voice come out of a speaker that said, "Hello, and welcome to the Red Room. Thanks very much for accepting the offer to enter the Red Room. Everything you see was chosen from the answers to your questionnaire, so we surmise you are very happy with your gifts. You now have the honour to ring a friend and nominate them to enter the Red Room. Just simply tell us their location and we will give you a meeting point to then pick up their envelope." Sam said happily, "I nominate my cousin Fred, please. He lives just around the corner from me." The voice spoke again. "Perfect. All you need to do is call your friend using your cell phone and let him know about the game, and tell him to look under the same place as you did by your bus stop." Sam was very happy to make the call, and when he hung up, he heard something from the wall. He wondered what it was. Then suddenly he heard gunshots, and he was shot to bits. His blood splattered all over the white room, and he wasn't alive to find out why the white room was called the Red Room. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Tom, Michael and Sam were watching the Squid Game in awe. They were familiar playing the Squid Game, the regular game, without the crazy stuff in the show. They were in awe of the colours used in the show and the action. Their parents wouldn't let them watch the show, which they all thought was lame because they all were 13. Tom said to Michael and Sam, "I have such an awesome idea. Why don't we play a game like they do in that show?" Sam turned to him and said, "Have you completely lost your mind? What next? You're going to pull out a gun and give us one each to see who shoots the other?" Tom replied, No, listen, I have a really great idea. We can set up a bridge across the building's roof. My dad has a cool rope bridge we can use. All I need to do is throw it over from one roof to the next and tie it onto a pole. Whoever runs to the other side first wins, but whoever doesn't, well, Then the person who's watching will cut the rope as soon as the winner is over. My dad is cutting device that will cut it in seconds, and before ye ask, no, nobody's going to get killed. I have a bouncy safety thing my dad uses for the circus acts he does. Sam said, that actually sounds pretty awesome, but who is going to cut the rope? Tom said, we will draw for it. A few minutes later they all drew what position they would play out of a jar, and Tom drew run. Michael drew run, and Sam drew watch and cut the rope. Michael said, I don't want to play this game, it's stupid. Tom said in a mocking way, why, are you scared you're going to fall off and kill yourself from falling on a bouncy cushion cheese that is used in my dad's circus the whole time? You won't even hurt your leg if you fall even from that height. Michael was mad at his comments, and eventually Sam changed with him and decided to run instead of cutting the rope. When the game began, Sam and Tom both ran as fast as they could across the bridge. Michael thought he'd teach them a lesson and cut the rope to them both fall, knowing they wouldn't die anyway from falling on the bouncy safety cushion. As they reached the middle, he smiled as he cut the rope and then watched them scream as they fell. But his smile quickly changed when he heard a loud thud from below and people screaming. He looked down and had realized somehow the air must have escaped the cushion, and he realized his two friends fell to their death and were now lying dead in a pool of blood. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Susie and Jane were twins and living in LA. Susie was very busy with her YouTube channel, where she spoke about different wellness tips and makeup tutorials. Jane was checking through her Instagram while Susie was speaking into the camera, doing a live stream. She said, "Hello guys, welcome to my live stream, and today I'm going to be giving ye great wellness tips on how to relax and get a better night's sleep. And having a great night's sleep not only adds to your physical well-being, but your mental well-being also. And I will also be sharing some delicious vegan recipes with ye that are also gluten-free." The live stream took about an hour, and afterwards Susie checked her emails and answered as many comments as she could. Susie was really looking forward to sign a new endorsement deal which would bring her in millions. She had a secret idea with her and her partners who were teaming with her. Everything was going great until Jane went missing. Susie explained to her partners that she would continue with her secrets to success idea in a few weeks, but right now she had to concentrate on getting her sister back. Susie spoke into the camera during a live stream. "Hi everyone, I have some very sad news for you today. My twin sister Jane has gone missing. If anyone knows anything about her whereabouts, please please contact me or your local police station. The views were going up and up during the stream, and news of Jane's disappearance spread like wildfire. Soon it was front page news, and on almost every news station. Susie couldn't believe that the team she was partnering with were putting so much pressure on her. When she was all alone in her house, she walked down to her basement and turned the light on. She took the gag off her twin sister and put a gun to her head and said, "Okay, Susie, you either give me that secret idea you have that you got that $1 million deal, or I'm going to shoot you in your head and tell them I have another idea. I am sick and tired of all your stupid videos of you flaunting yourself and acting like you know it all. Now I'm in your place, which proves what I always thought but never told you. I'm just as good as you, and as a matter of fact, I'm much better than you." Suddenly there was a noise at the stairs. Jane turned around. A guy was standing holding a gun and said, "You bitch, I knew you were crazy from your videos, and now look at you, holding your own twin sister at gunpoint." The man, who was a stalker of Susie from months, shot Jane in her head, thinking it was Susie, and untied Susie, thinking it was Jane. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content.